Imagine a small, quiet town where everyone knows everyone. A place where nothing much ever happens. But what if a serial killer lived among them for years? And what if the townspeople, for reasons unknown, turned a blind eye to the horror that was happening right in front of them? This is the story of how a killer was hidden in plain sight, protected by the very community that should have been his first line of defense. The killer's hidden life. For over a decade, John Matthews, a seemingly ordinary man, lived in the small town of Pinebrook. He was a well-liked mechanic, a quiet neighbor, and an active member of the local church. No one suspected a thing. Matthews had learned to blend in seamlessly. He lived alone in a modest house on the outskirts of town. To the public eye, he was a quiet, friendly man. But at night, his true nature would emerge. In the shadows, he stalked his victims, women who were isolated and vulnerable. His first murder, according to later investigations, occurred in 1996. But Matthews, skilled at covering his tracks, was never caught. He would carefully plan each murder, ensuring there were no signs of forced entry and no obvious leads. The unseen monster, a look into his mind. John Matthews was not the kind of person anyone would expect to be capable of murder. On the surface, he appeared to be a kind, well-liked individual. He was personable, soft-spoken, and always willing to lend a helping hand. He ran a small auto repair shop in Pinebrook and was a frequent volunteer at the local community center. He had an air of charm that made people trust him instantly. But underneath the surface, Matthews was a man driven by deep psychological urges. He was a textbook example of what psychologists call a family annihilator. Someone who can blend into society, appear completely normal, and yet harbor dark and violent tendencies. Matthews was, in a sense, a predator in sheep's clothing. Psychologically, Matthews exhibited traits of a narcissistic personality disorder. He was obsessed with control, power, and maintaining a perfect image. In his mind, he was superior to everyone around him, deserving of special treatment. His ability to manipulate others was finely honed, and he used it to stay under the radar for so long. He was meticulous in planning his crimes, taking great care to cover his tracks and avoid detection. His first victim was a woman he had met through work. She was vulnerable, and Matthews, sensing this, saw an opportunity to exert his dominance. After killing her, he made sure to leave no evidence of forced entry or struggle. He was patient, calculated, and methodical. He would later describe his first murder as a test, a way to see if he could get away with it. The thrill of control and the satisfaction of taking a life was something that Matthews craved more than anything. Matthews's victims were not chosen at random. He targeted women he perceived as isolated or vulnerable, women who would not raise immediate alarm if they disappeared. He carefully studied them, learned their routines, and watched them for days, sometimes even weeks, before making his move. He would often approach them with his charming demeanor, offering help, pretending to be a protector, someone who could be trusted. Once Matthews was in control, however, he would become a completely different person. His cold, calculating nature would surface. The calm exterior of the man who everyone thought they knew would disappear, replaced by a dangerous individual consumed by his need for power over others. Why did he kill? The answer lies in his psyche. Matthews felt empowered when he was in complete control of his victims. It was not about the thrill of the kill. It was about the power he derived from knowing that he could take someone's life without leaving a trace. Matthews was also driven by a need for validation. He needed to prove that he could get away with murder, that he was untouchable. His narcissism made him believe he was too smart to be caught, that he could outwit the authorities and the community he had worked so hard to blend into. For Matthews, murder was not just an act of violence. It was a form of self-gratification. Each crime served as a reminder of his superiority, a victory in his mind. The more he got away with it, the more he felt invincible. But despite his outward appearance, Matthews was always a man on edge. The anxiety of being caught haunted him, and he became increasingly paranoid. As time went on, his need to kill intensified. He could no longer stop himself, and the urge to dominate and control his victims became an obsession that he could not suppress. Matthews was not just a killer. He was a psychopath, calculating and cold, blending seamlessly into a community that was too willing to believe in the mask he wore. The town's silence, complicity or denial. When the truth about John Matthews came to light, the question wasn't just how he managed to evade justice for so long. It was why no one in Pine Brook ever said anything. Pine Brook was the kind of town where everyone waved at each other, where Sunday church was sacred, and where front doors were often left unlocked. It was a place built on trust, tradition, and the illusion of safety. In that environment, John Matthews thrived, not just because of his charm, but because the town was almost desperate to believe that someone like him couldn't possibly do such a thing. Many of the townspeople had interacted with Matthews regularly. He fixed their cars, helped elderly neighbors carry groceries, even donated to the school fundraiser. He was everywhere, but always just enough in the background to seem reliable, not remarkable. So when rumors began circulating about strange disappearances, no one ever looked in his direction. But that doesn't mean no one had doubts. There were whispers. A teenage girl remembered once seeing a woman crying in Matthews's car, a woman who later went missing. A neighbor found bloody rags in the garbage behind his house, but rationalized it as hunting waste. An old friend once confided that Matthews had a darkness in his eyes when he drank. Still, none of them went to the police. Why? Because in towns like Pine Brook, accusing someone is dangerous, not just for them, but for you. To question John Matthews was to question the town's ability to know its own people. To admit he was a killer was to admit that the town had failed. There was also fear. For some, it was fear of being wrong and facing shame. For others, it was fear of being right, of putting themselves in the sights of a man capable of unspeakable violence. And for a few, there was something worse than denial. There was protection. It later came to light that one of Matthews's close friends, a retired sheriff's deputy, had destroyed a parking ticket that would have placed him near a crime scene. A landlord never reported bloodstains found in an abandoned rental. A preacher ignored a confession made during a counseling session, citing spiritual confidentiality. So was the town complicit? Or were they simply unwilling to see what was right in front of them? The truth may lie somewhere in between. A collective blindness, fueled by fear, pride, and the desperate hope that evil couldn't exist in a place like theirs. But it did. And Pine Brook would never be the same again. The investigation, missed opportunities, and false leads. The investigation into the murders was hampered by a series of missteps and dead ends. Local police, small-town investigators with limited experience in serial crimes, were unable to connect the dots. For years, Matthews continued to live under the radar, and despite the mounting body count, the killer remained free. When DNA evidence was finally linked to him in 2001, it was too late. He had already moved away from Pine Brook, leaving behind only the memories of the townspeople who had refused to confront the truth. The day the truth came to light. In 2005, a break came when a witness came forward. A woman who had once been a close friend of Matthews finally confessed to seeing him near one of the crime scenes. For the first time, investigators pieced together the full story of Matthews' crimes, and in a dramatic turn, the townspeople finally realized the man they had trusted for so long was the killer. Matthews was arrested and later confessed to the murders, explaining that he had committed them because of an uncontrollable urge. The town was left in shock, struggling to comprehend how someone they knew and trusted could hide such a dark secret. The fallout. How the town responded. Once Matthews was arrested, the town's facade of safety and community was shattered. The small town, once filled with warmth and trust, was left haunted by the realization that their silence had protected a killer for years. Some townspeople felt guilty for not speaking up sooner. Others felt betrayed by the system that had failed them. The town was never the same. Friendships were broken, families torn apart, and the trust that once held Pinebrook together was irreparably damaged, a town's dark secret. The case of John Matthews remains a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest threats come from the people we least expect. For over a decade, he was a part of the very community he destroyed, and the townspeople were complicit in his reign of terror, either by choice or by ignorance. Thank you for watching this true crime story. If you know anything related to this case, please leave a comment below. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Beyond Facts TV for more gripping true crime stories.